For 40 days, churches around the world grow more solemn. Bells ring less, music fades, sacred images are veiled in purple cloth. It's as if even the sky bows in a long, expectant sigh. But what happens when that silence isn't just spiritual? What if, during these sacred days, something profane also awakens? Something that feeds on silence, on guilt, on the wavering faith of those who try, in vain, to shield themselves with prayer? The stories you're about to hear aren't about ordinary demons. They're about things that emerge when the sacred weakens, and sins, instead of being forgiven, are collected. With interest, before we begin, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon. Not for me, but for you. Because if any of these stories touch something you've felt before, a dream, a memory, a strange feeling, silence might not be enough to protect you. And if you feel like something is watching you after this video, comment, share. Don't keep it to yourself. That's how these things feed on silence, on secrecy. Now get ready for 5 terrifying accounts lived by nuns, priests, restorers, and faithful believers, all marked by Lent and by what Lent failed to cleanse. Story 1. The Confession Without Forgiveness. New England, 1997. A cold, damp winter blanketed the small town of Northbury when Father Thomas arrived to take over his new parish. An old Gothic stone church with cracked stained glass windows and a hand-carved confessional that seemed even older than the altar itself. It was the season of Lent, and the pews filled with remorseful faces. But it was in the confessional that Father Thomas felt the true weight of their souls. On the third night of confessions, he sat as usual behind the dark wooden screen. He prayed. He waited. Then, he heard the creak of the door on the other side. "Father, may I confess my sins?" The voice was female, young, fragile, but there was something off. She whispered as if afraid someone outside might hear her. As if terrified, she began listing common sins: lies, envy, impure thoughts. But as she continued, her tone shifted. I broke my vows. I saw things. I brought something with me." Father Thomas tried to interrupt, to ask for more details. But she began to cry, not from sadness, but from panic. "He's here with me. I tried to warn them, but they didn't listen. Now it's too late." Then silence. Father Thomas opened the curtain. No one was there. The door stood slightly ajar, as if no one had entered at all. On the floor, a mark. Wet footprints, as if someone had walked in barefoot from the snow. He looked outside. Nothing. Cold. Silence. That night, he didn't sleep. He tried to rationalize it: hallucination, stress, some cruel prank. But the next night, she returned. Same hour. Same voice. "They buried me in the cloister. I begged to be heard, but they silenced me. Now they pray above my prison." This time, she didn't ask for absolution. She only spoke and wept, a cry so deep, so full of pain, it seemed to soak into the wood around her. Father Thomas rushed to the parish archives. He discovered that 73 years earlier, a novice named Sister Margaret had vanished during Lent. They said she went mad, claimed someone visited her every night. The last time she was seen was inside the confessional, where she had locked herself for hours. She was never found. At the end of Lent, Father Thomas sealed the confessional. He placed a cross, wrote a prayer in Latin, and left a note: "Let the unspoken sins stay with their owners." But on Fridays, especially during Holy Week, the cleaning staff says they hear a woman's voice crying, begging for forgiveness. And just outside the door, bare footprints on the cold stone floor. Story 2. The 3 knocks in the chapel. Minnesota, 2014. On the border with Canada, surrounded by snow and forest, stood an old convent that had kept its routines untouched for decades. Prayers at 5 a.m., total silence after sunset, and strict fasting throughout Lent. Living there was young Sister Helena, a newly admitted novice. At 22, she saw the convent as a fresh start, a chance to escape a troubled family past and dedicate her life to faith, silence, and redemption. But what she found during those 40 days before Easter was a different kind of silence. A silence that didn't forgive. On the first Friday of Lent, as she cleaned the chapel pews, she heard something strange. 3 sharp knocks, coming from the empty confessional. "It's just the wind," she whispered to herself, trying to focus on her task. The next Friday, again after the fast ended, 3 knocks. Same time, same place. She asked the other sisters about it. None had heard a thing. The Mother Superior simply said, "During Lent, our vigilance must double, not just against our own temptations, but against other presences." On the 3rd Friday, Helena decided to stay late. She prayed alone, candles lit, the Bible open to Psalm 91. At exactly 11 p.m., the sound returned. Knock, knock, knock. But this time, the confessional door creaked open. By itself. No one was inside. Just an old Bible, open to a page she hadn't left it on. "I will deliver them to the fire, and I will test them." Terrified, she locked the chapel and rushed back to her room. In the hallway, she crossed paths with Sister Agnes, an elderly nun who hadn't spoken in years. Agnes grabbed her arm and whispered something she shouldn't have been able to say. "Don't answer. Never open it. Just pray." The next day, Helena tried to tell the Mother Superior, but her response was cold. "If you're hearing the knocks, it's because someone answered once. Now." The chapel listens from the inside. For the final 2 weeks of Lent, Sister Helena refused to be alone. But the knocks continued, and she wasn't the only one who heard them. On Good Friday, during the Stations of the Cross, the sisters gathered in prayer. At the 10th station, Jesus is stripped of his garments. The central candle extinguished itself. Then, loud and clear, 3 knocks echoed. Not from the confessional this time, but from the main chapel door. When they opened it, no one was there. Only a pair of blood-stained leather sandals, placed before the altar. Since that day, one rule stands firm. No novice may remain alone in the chapel during Lent. And if someone knocks 3 times at your door, always wait for the 4th. Because those who knock 3 times aren't asking to come in. They're waiting for you to answer. Story 3, The Gaze of the Icon. Savannah, Georgia, 2008. In the historic part of the city, known for its moss-covered cemeteries and century-old churches, a sacred art restorer was hired for a discreet job, restoring a Byzantine icon of Our Lady of Sorrows, found in the basement of a monastery closed since the 1940s. The restorer was meticulous, methodical, and, until then, a devout atheist. She focused on technique, preservation, historical value. Religious symbolism meant nothing to her. Until this icon. It was cracked and faded, but oddly intact in one spot. The eyes. Painted in a deep, almost wet tone, they seemed to glisten. And the most unsettling part? No matter where and moved, the eyes followed her. At first, she dismissed it as optical illusion. But when the previous restorer refused to continue, claiming a sense of overwhelming panic, and decided to take over alone, she began restoring the face, smoothing the edges using modern revitalization techniques. On the 3rd day, the eyes looked different, not worn or faded, wider, more alive, as if they were reacting to the restoration. That night, reviewing photos of her progress, and noticed the impossible. The eyes in the images weren't consistent. In the first day's photo, they looked slightly to the left. By day 4, they stared directly into the lens. And in the most recent one, they were staring at her. Terrified, she tried to suspend the project. But something kept pulling her back. A silent obligation. As if finishing the restoration wasn't just work, but destiny. By the 5th week, now during Holy Week, the city buzzed with processions and mass, and pushed to finish. She wanted to return the piece and walk away. But that night, the image cried. Literally, a dark droplet fell from the corner of the icon's right eye. It wasn't paint, not water. It was thick, red, almost black, and grabbed a cloth, took photos, documented everything. But when she showed the parish team, They said nothing, only stared, cold and silent. Later, an older priest asked to speak with her alone. "You should never have touched that icon during Lent," he said. "It was sealed for a reason." "What reason?" Anne asked, almost laughing in disbelief. "It has cried before, always during Lent, always for someone who lost their faith, or never had it to begin with." "What does that mean?" "It means he's watching you now, not through paint, through his own eyes." The next morning, the icon was removed and resigned, moved away. But in the weeks that followed, she told close friends that she woke every night at 3:03 a.m. with her eyes burning. In the mirror, she sometimes saw her reflection, looking in a different direction than her body. She never worked with religious art again. And to this day, she keeps heavy curtains in her home, not to block who might be watching from outside, but because she feels something is still watching her from inside. Story 4. The Cell of the Penitent Sister. Pennsylvania, 2020. During the renovation of an old Carmelite convent, soon to become a spiritual retreat center, a group of young volunteers was invited to help with the initial cleanup. The building had been abandoned for over 50 years, ever since the last group of elderly nuns was relocated to care homes. On the 3rd floor of the cloister, there was a sealed wing, boarded up with thick planks and wax seals. According to the convent's official records, that hallway of cells wasn't supposed to exist. But on the first day of Lent, one of the volunteers found a narrow gap in the wooden boards, where the wind whispered through, and beyond it, a hidden door, old, heavy, dark wood, a cross carved deep into its surface, and beside it, an inscription in Latin, non vocabit, non respondabit. She will not call, she will not answer. The group's coordinator decided to enter, along with 2 other young women. The cell was small, windowless, a decaying straw mattress in the corner, and on the walls, hundreds of prayers carved with fingernails, psalms, verses, cries of desperation. "Forgive me, Lord. I have paid. I have paid." I still hear his screams. In the corner, a mirror was covered with a black veil. When one of the girls pulled it down, she saw only her reflection, but her clothes had changed. She was wearing a nun's habit. They laughed, nervously, but one girl, Lila, refused to look. She said she felt tightness in her chest, as if she wasn't welcome. That night, in the makeshift sleeping quarters, Lila had vivid nightmares. She saw a man screaming, chained to the stone floor. A nun knelt before him, praying without pause. Then silence. She woke up gasping, her chest burning, and one sentence echoed in her mind. She prayed for him to stop, but he only stopped when she did too. Searching the old diocesan records, they discovered the cell had belonged to Sister Claire, a penitent nun who chose to live in isolation for the rest of her life, after witnessing an exorcism that ended in tragedy. They said she was the only one who could contain him, a presence that came during Lent and would only retreat with constant prayer. The problem? When Sister Claire's health began to fail, she stopped praying, and shortly after, the convent closed. Lila insisted the cell be sealed again, but ever since, strange reports have surfaced from the retreat center's visitors. People claim to hear whispered prayers in the restrooms, crying behind the walls, and, most disturbingly, rhythmic knocking during the night, as if someone is still inside, still praying, still paying for something that was never her sin. Story 5. The Fast of the Dead Saint. Texas, 2012. In the small town of San Marcos, near the Mexican border, a long-abandoned convent from the 1970s was reopened and turned into a sanctuary. At the center of its altar, encased in glass, lay a sacred relic, the incorrupt body of Saint Beatrice of Penitence, a nun canonized for her extreme devotion during Lent. She fasted until death, offering her life for the salvation of sinners. Pilgrims traveled from across the country to see her, but there was a rule. During the 40 days of Lent, visitors were required to fast before entering the sanctuary. It was tradition, it was devotion, or maybe it was something more. This story follows Elena, a theology student who visited the sanctuary with her fiancé and a close friend. Curious and skeptical, she was fascinated by the legend of the saint. But even during her first visit, something felt wrong. She felt dizzy, unsteady. The guide only smiled and said, "It's normal." Her presence weighs heavier on those who are still full of themselves. Elena began to fast, not out of faith, but to fully experience what the saint had endured. At first, it was only lightheadedness. Then came the dreams. The dead nun would sit at the foot of Elena's bed, smiling, whispering, "Fast, empty yourself, let me in." Elena's friend stopped visiting the sanctuary. She claimed to hear the glass case creaking at night. Her fiancé began to waste away. Even while eating, he lost weight. He grew nauseated at the sight of food. And in his sleep, he repeated one phrase, "She's hungry, but not for bread." Elena tried to break the fast. One day, she ate everything in sight, desperate to regain strength. That night, she woke up with deep red scratches on her stomach, as if something had clawed her from the inside. She dug deeper, found erased records. Other pilgrims had died during Lent in that same sanctuary, all in silence, all while fasting, all before the glass coffin. Elena confronted the Mother Superior. The response was cold. "Saint Beatrice gave everything for us. It's only fair. We give something back." On the eve of Easter, Elena collapsed. She woke up in the infirmary, surrounded by candles, communion wafers, and the body of the saint right beside her bed. The coffin was open. She fled, never returned to church. Now, she lives under medical supervision, struggling with memory loss. But every Friday of Lent, she says she feels the hunger return. Only this time, it's not coming from inside her. She swears there's another presence fasting through her. And she fears that one day, when her body is too weak to resist, the coffin will open again. During Lent, the world is expected to fall silent. We turn inward, we repent, we fast. But no one tells you that in this silence, other voices whisper too. The confessional where death begs for absolution. The chapel door that knocks 3 times, but never asks permission. The icon that doesn't just watch, but judges. The sealed cell where prayers never stopped, for a sin that wasn't hers. And a saint glorified in death, but still hungry. These aren't just stories. They are warnings, because when we fast, we make space, and we don't always get to choose what comes in. Not all silence is peace. Not all faith is protection. And not every sanctuary is safe. If you made it this far, subscribe, hit the bell, and tell us in the comments, have you ever felt like someone or something was with you during Lent? Don't wait to share your story, because some testimonies can only be heard while faith is still alive.